Hello, my name is David Bearfield. I'm the Director of the European Personnel Selection Office, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you today about the career opportunities within the European Union institutions and to describe the selection processes that we have to become an EU civil servant. First of all, I'd like to explain where an EU career can lead you. The European Personnel Selection Office, or EPSO as it's usually known, we recruit on behalf of all of the EU institutions. So if you pass one of our selection procedures and are selected as a result, you can find yourself working in a variety of different EU institutions, ranging from the European Council, the Parliament, the Commission, and the Economic and Social Committee, the Committee of the Regions, the two courts based in Luxembourg, and some of the other smaller institutions. And all of those institutions have a real variety of interesting and exciting career opportunities that can appeal to you. So what's on offer and what is an EU career all about? Well, we believe in EPSO that an EU career is something really special and it's very unique what we have to offer. We've distilled it down into a few key points that we think really sums up very well the special features about working as an EU civil servant. Perhaps the first and the most important of those is that we offer not just a job for life, which many see as something important, but in particular a lifetime of different jobs. You can work throughout a whole career in a variety of different posts, and you might be moving from one policy field to another policy field within an institution, for example, for transport, and then move on to environment or external relations. But you can move from different functions, so you can move from a policy job to a different function, such as, for example, human resources or IT or financial management. And indeed, you can move from one institution to another, and many EU civil servants do that. So over the course of your whole career, you can find yourself doing a whole variety of different tasks, which means really that you're always being challenged by something new and something different. And indeed, it means that you have the opportunity, and that's another important thing about EU careers, is that you're encouraged to learn new skills throughout your career, and also have the opportunity to learn new languages. So we're really giving you the opportunity to have an exciting career full of different opportunities. And indeed, those opportunities also mean that you'll be able to work and travel abroad. That's something that many people find really interesting and a stimulating part of the job. Perhaps most important of all, though, is the opportunity or the fact that if you come to work for the EU institutions, you're going to have really interesting and challenging work, whatever the area that you're working in. And that work is not only picking up on some of the biggest challenges that face Europe today, where we need people who are able to come and find practical and pragmatic solutions to the challenges that Europe face, but also, and I think personally, in my own experience, that's something that's been really positive, is that you have the impression that whatever you're doing, you're actually making a real and positive difference for people throughout Europe, and indeed in many cases across the world. And that's something that makes a career working for Europe something really special, something really unique. And it's at the heart of our main proposition, our offering as our EU Careers brand, is that you can come and play your part in the construction of Europe and making a positive impact on the lives of millions of citizens across the whole continent. Last and not least, we also offer an attractive benefits package. We are looking for people who are highly talented, and therefore we also offer a package of benefits that's commensurate with that. To pick on a few particular points out of all of that package of offering, we do give you an environment where you're encouraged to learn new skills and languages. And there's a real strong focus throughout your career of training. That's both formal off-the-job training, but also on-the-job training and personal development. And that, of course, also includes language training. You're actually required to learn a third EU language before you can be promoted for the first time after you start working in the institutions. But many officials don't see that as a burden. They see it as something very positive and take that opportunity to learn not just a third, but often perhaps a fourth or a fifth EU language. We also have flexible working conditions. There's a mix of flexi-time, part-time working, the possibility to telework. We offer parental leave, and you can also take career breaks if you need to. So we really make it possible for you to combine active professional life with your family life. And overall, I think we offer a good package of benefits, not just the salary and allowances and the pension, but also childcare facilities so that your kids can be taken care of sometimes in school holidays or after school. And indeed, there's a system of European schools which offer education, a multilingual, multinational education, but also with a strong component in your mother tongue. So much for the offer. What sort of people are we actually looking for? Well, you probably won't be surprised to find out that if the package is very interesting, and I believe unique, we're actually setting the bar fairly high in terms of what we want. We're looking for people who are really good at what they do. So we're looking for top lawyers, top economists, top generalists, top auditors, people who are the best in their particular field, but also people who are resilient. We're looking for people to work hard and take up some really big and tough challenges. So we don't need people who are going to fall at the first fence. And we want people who are really motivated to succeed, to learn and develop throughout their career, to really have a desire to take up all those opportunities that I've just talked about. And also people who have a real in the desire to make a difference, to make a personal contribution to helping to shape Europe and the world. And as I said, that really is one of the strongest things, the most positive things, I think, that many of my colleagues and myself find about working as an EU civil servant. And of course, perhaps obvious, but nonetheless important, we want people who actually actively enjoy working in a multicultural team. And that's going to be your everyday reality, working with people from 26 countries other than your own, soon 27, and really to find that a pleasure as well as a challenge. And lastly, we really want people who have a strong drive to deliver results. Europe, as I said, is faced with challenges, huge challenges. The European Union institutions are the means to meet those challenges, and so the institutions can only achieve their goals if each person within the institutions has a real commitment and a drive to delivering the results in their area of responsibility. And believe me, you can find yourself, even after a very short time in the institutions, with some very significant responsibilities. Who are we looking for? Well, we have some very basic eligibility criteria that you need to fulfill. First of all, obviously, you need to be a citizen of the European Union. You need to speak, in addition to your mother tongue, which needs to be an EU language, a second language. And for the purposes of our selection process, that has to be one of English, French or German. And for some linguistic profiles, in particular interpreters and translators, you need to have an additional EU language. We have two broad profiles. Firstly, graduates, where you need to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree, or though in practice many people have a higher degree. And for non-graduate profiles, for assistant jobs, you need to have completed your secondary education and have a minimum of 3 years professional experience. So broadly, in terms of what is an EU career, it's divided into two main career paths. Firstly, for graduates, you come in as an administrator, and you can find yourself being a policy administrator or a lawyer or an economist, working as a linguist, working in finance, research, management, a whole range of different areas, some generalist and some specialist. And as a non-graduate, an assistant, you will play a key supporting role on one of a whole range of internal, often internally but not always internally focused areas supporting administrator staff. So where can an EU career lead you? I've talked about some of the opportunities that you have once you become an EU civil servant, but rather than take my word for it or just reading about it on our website, perhaps it's even better to go and hear it straight from the horse's mouth. And for that reason, we've made some videos available on YouTube. You can see the link on the slide, or you can find them via our website. And we have people recently recruited into the institutions who talk from the heart about their own experiences of working for Europe. And that's probably a great way to get a feel for that yourself and to see whether that might be something that really attracts you. So if you're interested, you're really excited about these opportunities and want to apply, what do you do next? Well, we run a series of competitions. We recruit by means of an open competition, which is basically a competitive series of examinations. And we launch those each year in 3 main cycles. Every spring, typically in March, we run a competition for graduates, administrators. In the summer for linguists, usually conference interpreters and translators for a variety of languages, depending on the needs of the institutions from year to year. And at the end of each year for assistants, non-graduates with some experience, as I explained. Interspersed amongst those cycles, we also launch a range of specialist selection processes and selection processes for contractual staff who will come and work on a time-limited basis with the institutions, and they are launched as and when needed. So I'll give you a brief overview of the selection process itself. It's divided into a number of stages. First of all, you need to apply, obviously. That's a fully electronic process, and via our EU Careers website you will find the online application form which you need to complete, and you also need to create an EPSO account. That's a process that takes quite some time. And then once the competition is published and you've applied, usually the first round of tests are sat on a computer. They're usually a series of multiple choice tests, and the content of those tests will vary quite widely depending on the profile that we're looking for. And you can take those tests in test centres across the whole of the European Union and indeed worldwide in many cases. And if you're successful and you get the highest marks that we're looking for in those computer-based tests, you'll be invited to an assessment centre, which takes place usually in EPSO's premises in Brussels, occasionally in Luxembourg. And if you're successful in those, then your name is placed on the reserve list of successful applicants, or we usually call them laureates. And from that list, the institutions then recruit staff to individual posts as they're published. So the whole process takes around about 9 months, sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little longer. As I said, the first phase is a computer-based or CBT test. The tests are delivered partly in your first language and partly in your second language. Typically, they'll be focused on cognitive abilities, but also a range of other skills that are relevant to the particular test, and they might vary, for example, for linguists, where we have specialist tests for translators. The test centre is in your own country, usually where you're living. You have a lot of freedom about where and when you take the test, and normally all applicants are invited to sit that test. The assessment centre takes a fixed quota of the highest scoring candidates in the CBT round, and as I mentioned, they're taken in usually in our assessment centre premises in Brussels, and they are competency-based tests. And then we take a fixed quota, typically around about 1 person in 3 from the assessment centre who is successful and whose name will be put on the reserve list. So we'll look at the most common tests briefly that are taken for our largest competition every year for graduate administrators, normally at grade 5 and grade 7. You first of all take some reasoning tests, a mix of verbal, numerical, abstract reasoning tests, and those tests are taken in your main language, normally your mother tongue, all of the 23 official EU languages. And in addition, you'll take a situational judgment test, and that test you take in your second language, which needs to be one of English, French or German. For other profiles, we'll test your linguistic skills, not only your verbal reasoning, but also we're introducing this year some new special linguistic comprehension tests. And for assistants, you'll be asked to take a range of professional skills tests looking at some of the particular competencies that you are required to demonstrate as an assistant. If you're lucky enough to be invited to the assessment centre, which I have to remind you takes place in your second language, it will need to be again English, French or German. You'll take a range of different tests depending on the profile, but typically a case study, you'll have to give an oral presentation, you'll have a structured competency-based interview and a group exercise. There may also be some practical tests or professional skills tests for different profiles. And all of those tests are based typically on EU scenarios. So I mentioned competency-based testing, and it's important to point out that we are really looking for a very clear profile of competencies in the people that we're going to be selecting to become EU civil servants. And we've established a list of, or a profile of 7+1 competencies that we're looking for all successful candidates to have. Obviously, you're not going to be equally strong in all of them, but we're looking for people who are pretty good across the board. And those skills are analysis and problem solving, communicating, delivering quality and results, learning and development, prioritizing and organizing, resilience and working with others. And for AD administrator profiles, we're also looking for leadership potential, because that's the cadre from which we're going to draw the future managers and leaders of the EU institutions. So if you're successful in all of that process, then your name will be placed on a reserve list. It's basically a database of successful candidates. That list is valid for at least 1 year, but is sometimes extended. You're not guaranteed a job, but you're very likely to be contacted by the institutions who will invite you for a job interview when they have a vacancy, and they will invite you for an interview and make an offer to the person that best fits the requirements for the particular job. Where do you start with all that? I think it's important, if you're going to apply and take it seriously, as I hope you will, to get a feeling of what you can expect. And indeed, via our EU Careers website, you can find a number of examples of the sorts of tests that we have. Very briefly, we have firstly verbal reasoning, fairly standard verbal reasoning test, where you'll be given a text and asked questions about your understanding of that text. It's a similar thing for numerical reasoning, but obviously you're confronted with typically a series of figures. It may be a graph or a chart, and you're asked to make some calculations based on those to draw some logical conclusions. And abstract reasoning needs little explanation. It's a fairly standard test of its sort, but it's a very good predictor of overall ability and intelligence. I'll say perhaps a word about our situational judgment test, and these tests are very much mapped onto many of our competencies in the profile I showed you before. And typically we'll be giving you a scenario that you can expect to be confronted with perhaps in your first weeks or months working for the EU civil service. And we give you, for each of those scenarios, which you have a little time to read, a number of courses of action that you could take. And we ask you to identify the most and the least appropriate courses of action, and you get points for identifying both. If you want to discover more about EU Careers, there's plenty of information available, and the key place to go is our EPSO or EU Careers website, where there's a whole host of information about all of the different opportunities that are there, and you can find out what the selection process looks like in more detail, see some practice questions, as I mentioned, go and see some of the videos and find out. And indeed, we also have a very active presence on Facebook. In fact, I think there are many tens of thousands of people who have signed up to it, and it's a great place where you can find out up-to-date information about EU Careers, and also to chat with other people who, like you, are interested in becoming one of the EU civil servants in the future. So I hope I've managed to give you a flavour of what being an EU official is like and how you can go about applying. I think if you do and you succeed, I can certainly promise you an absolutely fascinating and challenging career, full of lots of different opportunities. Not always easy, but a really challenging and great career where you can learn, develop and grow, and at the same time really have the real impression that you're making a real and positive difference for Europe. So thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.